And speaking of former Officer Coward, he sat down with the boys again for a second interview. And surprise, surprise, it was the same thing from the first interview. Them trying to get us to feel sorry for them. If Tatum and these boys put half the amount of energy as they put into these stupid interviews to finding what happened to Nolan Xavier Wells, this case would have been solved 3 weeks ago. Newsflash, y'all still have your life and Nolan doesn't. Nobody feels sorry for you. Yes, you guessed it. I am on one again today. Tatum and these boys drive me crazy. There has been a ton of developments over the past couple of days. Unfortunately, no positive developments in finding out what happened to Nolan Xavier Wells, but developments no less. Sit back, relax. I'll tell you everything you need to know, and then I'll hand it off to you, the out louders. So let me know what you think in the comment section below. Chris Cuomo sat down with Bart's lawyer, Russell Latino. This is where he, I think, accidentally leaks information that he has access to Nolan Xavier Wells' autopsy and toxicology report. Now, we'll get to that in a moment. However, I would like to just backtrack and let you guys know the ridiculousness that happened during this interview leading up to the revelation that Chris Cuomo has access to Nolan's state-ran sealed autopsy. Sealed, but Chris has access. Okay, I'm going to play a couple of clips for you. We're going to start off with the lawyer, Russell Latino, addressing the CETO call, and Chris says, the lawyer says, a version gets released by MDMS. It's not clear that is the original version.
That conversation from the sweetened audio, which sounds terrible, sounds like there's blaming and about Nolan waking up, and Nolan may well be there by the nature of this conversation. What is your position on the veracity of that sweetened audio?
That audio gets released by the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources. A version of it, it's not clear that that was the original audio.
Excuse me, Mr. Latino, are you now questioning the authorities in Mississippi? Because when we do it, it's defamation. But now you're going to tell us the audio put out by the officials at MDMS, you are questioning if it's original?
That audio gets released by the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources. A version of it, it's not clear that that was the original audio.
Now, listen to Chris ask Russell Latino about Bart's potential implication in Nolan Wells' passing. You'll notice he asked Russell Latino 2 or 3 questions. He answers it, and then he asks him, hey, did anybody see your client, Bart, with Nolan while the boat was leaving? Then you're going to see the deflection, and Russell Latino says, certainly not to my knowledge. Whoa, you had all the definitive answers before, but all of a sudden not to my knowledge, and then you smile?
Your client was not on a boat with Nolan Wells. He knew Nolan Wells. He was not with him. When your client got on the boat to help, Nolan Wells was not there. True?
That's correct.
Your client was not present when anything happened to Nolan Wells. Is that true?
Yes.
Your client was never part of a conversation where other people were panicked about what had happened to Nolan Wells.
That's correct.
And no one saw your client with Nolan Wells while the boat was leaving.
Yeah, I mean, certainly not to my knowledge. Well, certainly not to my knowledge.
So after Bart's lawyer answered those questions and avoids the last one, Chris now says, well, because you answered all those questions so definitively, you're basically saying that that CETO call doesn't matter. And then you'll hear him say, I'll just say my client had nothing to do with Nolan's passing. Again, avoiding the direct question if the CETO call matters or not.
So then it doesn't really matter what the sweetened audio says unless there was another guy with the same name as your client who was on that boat at a different time. Other than that, your suggestion is it cannot be accurate.
Yeah, I will just say again that my client had nothing to do with the Nolan Wells.
Oh, the deflection does not stop there, people. Chris now says, does Bart remember the last time he saw Nolan on the island? Bart's lawyer completely avoids the question because he's like, okay, I know I've been ducking and dodging, but let me just completely avoid it now. Then he starts talking about Bart being 21 years old.
Does your client remember the last time he saw Nolan Wells at the event? Does he remember the last time he saw him there?
Yeah, what I would say on that is he has told me that he did see Nolan that day, but that they really didn't interact that day. One of the things to appreciate here is that my client is 21 years old.
Does he remember the last time he saw him there?
Okay, now let's get to the most important clip from this interview where Chris talks about the autopsy.
Now, I am hearing from sources that I will protect close to the investigation that the investigators do have more information from their autopsy. You have also heard that they know things about the first autopsy.
There are things that I know that I think the average person doesn't know.
I think there are things that I know that the average person doesn't know that are not points of speculation.
All right, sorry, don't mean to interrupt, but notice how Chris just flexed his muscles there to say like, oh, well, I have more knowledge than the average person. That just lets you know that he is more concerned with leaking this information for clicks, for views, for his notoriety than he is trying to solve the case. Because if you have this information, why aren't you telling Nolan's parents about it? Why are you on here telling the YouTube? And why are you here flexing that like, well, I know more than the average person? Chris?
They found evidence of water in tissue and cavities consistent with drowning. That there was water there, but it is not conclusive. I am being told it is consistent.
The Nolan Wells investigation has reached a point where one medical finding could change how this entire case is understood. But there is a problem. The independent autopsy did not give Nolan's family the answer they were hoping for. It classified the cause and manner of death as undetermined, and now attention is turning to the other examination, the official autopsy performed by Mississippi authorities, including the toxicology testing that could reveal what was in Nolan Wells' system when he died. That result matters because investigators are still trying to determine one basic question. Did Nolan drown because of an accident, or is there evidence pointing to something that happened before he entered the water? At this point, there is no confirmed public finding that Nolan was murdered. There is also no final public cause of death that closes the case. That distinction is critical. The independent examination by forensic pathologist Dr. Roger Mitchell found no fractures or deep tissue injuries that established blunt force trauma. But it also could not determine whether Nolan was conscious when he entered the water or whether another factor contributed to his death. The report classified the cause and manner as undetermined pending further investigation. And one detail from that examination has received particular attention. Mitchell reported an area of red discoloration on the back of Nolan's head, but the finding was inconclusive. It did not establish when the discoloration occurred, and it did not prove that Nolan had been assaulted. The condition of the body also limited what the independent examiner could determine. Most importantly, some structures needed for a complete examination of the airway and lungs were not available to the independent pathologist because they had been retained during the earlier state examination. That meant the second autopsy could not independently answer every question about drowning, and this is exactly why the official autopsy matters so much. The state examination was performed shortly after Nolan's body was recovered. It had access to the body at an earlier stage than the independent examination. It also included toxicology. Those results could provide information about substances present in Nolan's system. But toxicology must be interpreted carefully. Even if a substance is detected, that does not automatically tell investigators that it caused Nolan's death. The concentration, timing, other medical findings, and circumstances all matter. And that is why the toxicology result, when officially released, could become one of the most important pieces of evidence in the case. But it will still have to be considered alongside the rest of the investigation. That brings us to the interview evidence. Because while the medical examiners are examining Nolan's body, investigators have also been comparing what people who were with him that day have said. One of the most closely watched interviews came from Warren Hudson, a friend who was on the island. Hudson was asked directly whether he killed Nolan. He said no. He was asked whether he had anything to do with Nolan's death. Again, he denied it. He was also asked whether anything had been deleted from Nolan's phone. He denied that as well. Those answers are important because they are direct statements from someone who was there. But they are still statements. They are not independent proof that nothing happened. That distinction has to remain in place. Hudson has also described what he says happened with Nolan's phone. According to his account, Nolan left the phone on the boat, as other people had done with their belongings. Hudson said the phones were collected and later returned. He also denied that anyone accessed or deleted messages from Nolan's phone. That is now something investigators can potentially test. The phone itself may be more useful than any interview. Digital forensics can potentially establish what happened to the device, what information remains on it, and whether the data supports or contradicts the accounts investigators have received. And that is why the planned joint forensic inspection of Nolan's phone is so important. The family and law enforcement agreed to examine the device together. If the phone contains information relevant to Nolan's final hours, that evidence could become far more important than anything being argued online. Then there is the GPS timeline. The boat Nolan arrived on left Horn Island at approximately 4:31 p.m. Nolan was not aboard. That fact has been repeatedly confirmed in the available records. The boat's GPS data then tracks its movements back toward the mainland. But the GPS cannot answer the most important question. Where was Nolan during that time? His last confirmed sighting was around 3 p.m. The boat left at 4:31. That leaves roughly 90 minutes. And those 90 minutes are still at the center of the investigation. There is another reason the timeline matters. The boat had experienced a mechanical problem that afternoon. A towing assistance call was placed while the group was still dealing with the vessel, and the dispatch audio independently documents that the boat was taking on water because of a pump failure. That audio was recorded before Nolan was reported missing, making it an important piece of contemporaneous evidence. So investigators are not simply comparing people's memories. They have GPS records. They have dispatch audio. They have witness accounts. They have the phone. They have the autopsy evidence. And eventually, the toxicology results. The challenge is putting all of those pieces together. Because one piece of evidence cannot automatically answer the entire case. The independent autopsy does not prove foul play. The fact that authorities have considered drowning does not by itself prove an accident. A witness denial does not prove innocence. And a toxicology result, whatever it eventually shows, will have to be interpreted in context. That is why this investigation remains so important. The evidence has to be allowed to speak for itself. And there is another development that could become just as important as the medical findings. The case is expected to move toward a grand jury after the sheriff's investigation is completed. A grand jury does not determine guilt. It does not mean someone has been convicted. It is part of the process prosecutors use to determine whether there is sufficient evidence to pursue criminal charges. The official autopsy and toxicology could therefore become important pieces of what prosecutors eventually review. But right now, the public is still waiting for the complete medical picture. And that brings us to the question that I believe matters most. What will the toxicology actually show? Will it provide evidence that helps explain how Nolan ended up in the water? Will it support the possibility of an accidental drowning? Will it reveal something investigators have not publicly discussed? Or will it leave the same unanswered questions that have followed this case from the beginning? We do not know yet, and I am not going to tell you that we do. What we can say is that Nolan's independent autopsy did not establish a cause or manner of death. The state examination remains critical because it includes information from the earlier examination and toxicology testing that could add another piece to the timeline. Mississippi Today. Then there is the interview. Then the phone. Then the GPS. Then those missing 90 minutes. And somewhere inside those pieces may be the information that finally explains what happened to Nolan Wells. This is also why I want you to stay with this case carefully. Not because every rumor deserves attention. Because the next verified piece of evidence could change the story. If the toxicology results are released, if the phone examination produces new information, or if investigators establish something new about those final 90 minutes, that development could matter far more than another viral theory. So if you are following the Nolan Wells investigation, subscribe now, because when the official findings are released, you will want to know exactly what they say, not what social media claims they say. And there is one question I want you to keep in mind as we move forward. What happened during those final 90 minutes before the boat left Horn Island without Nolan? That is still the question the evidence has to answer.